So I guess some of you already have a multi-module application, so you know there's one pain point, which is that it brings a lot of boilerplate code, so every module will have the same code. So I'm here to present you a solution to remove this boilerplate code using convention plugins. So my name is Satyan. I'm a developer at Mojo. So first, why should I use a multi-module architecture? So the first point is that you get to follow the separation of concerns. So every module is going to have a specific section that is going to handle. Then you can reduce the build time for 3 reasons. So first of all, if you use public and implementation modules, you get to only recompile the necessary modules. So which means that if you change something in an implementation module, since all your modules should depend on your public module, it won't get recompiled. Then you also get to only use the necessary plugin in your module. So since Android plugins are really expensive, you can just use module only using your JVM. And finally, every module can be compiled in parallel if they are independent. Then with multi-module, you can also create several apps. So demo app if you want to QA or feature or showcase some features you have, free versus pro features, and also white labeling. Now is an example of a multi-module architecture. So we have an app module, then we have 3 feature modules, and those feature modules are using a bunch of data modules which are dividing into a public API module and a library module. So you can see there that all the green ones are using the Android library plugin, and they are going to be configured the same. So we will have the same compile SDK, the same target SDK, and the same min SDK there. So here's what we want to get. So if we take, for example, an implementation data module, what we want to get is just to apply this convention plugin, which is the Android lib plugin, and then this module will just get to use its own plugins and own dependencies. So first, let's start by sharing the dependencies. So to share the dependencies, we are going to use Gradle version catalog. To do so, we need to write a lib.version.toml file, where you can declare your versions and your libraries. And then a lib's property is going to be accessible from your module, and you can use it to access your libraries and your versions. Now we are going to create a convention plugin project. So to do so, we are going to create a plugin directory with a settings.gradle file. So in this file, we are going to reuse the same version catalog to be able to use the same version. So to do so, we create a new libs, which is going to reuse the same file. Now we can include our plugins build into our root project. So to do so, in the root project settings.gradle, we use include build. This way, the plugin will be compiled, and then it's going to be accessible in our app modules. Now we can also add the use plugin as dependencies. So in our case, we want to configure Kotlin Gradle and Android Gradle and IL Gradle if we want to use it. So we just need to add them to the build.gradle of our convention plugins. So now we need to register our convention plugins. So to do that, we are going to use the Java Gradle plugin library. Plugin, sorry. There's a lot of plugins. It's a bit. So to do that, we can just use a register with the name of the plugin we was using, an ID, and then the implementation class that we are going to write right now. So one thing is that regardless of the language we are using in or Kotlin or Groovy, you can write Gradle plugins in any language like Groovy, Java, or Kotlin. And the syntax will be very similar to the one you're used to in build.gradle files. So let's start by writing the Android lib convention plugin. So it's simply a Gradle plugin which has a project as a target. First, we want to apply the plugins that are going to use by the target project. So here we want to apply the Android library plugin and then the Kotlin Android plugin using the plugin manager. So this way the project will have those 2 plugins configured. And then we are going to configure the Android extension. To do that, we are going to create an object to be able to share the config in every module. So it's just a file with the version we are going to use. And then we are going to configure it. So to do that, we use the library extension, which is the class that the AGP is providing us. And then we are going to use this method that I wrote. So this method is just like the classic stuff we are doing in the build.Gradle, and I just use it because I can reuse it before for the application and the library, so it's going to be the same configuration. Now we want to add dependencies. So to do that, since we are writing code, we cannot access the version catalog, so we need to use the unsafe API. To that, I created two extensions, one which is libs to access a library, and one which is recurrent version, which allows us to access a version. So here's the code. We'll leave it like a few seconds. So one thing that you can note is that there is throwing an error if the version is missing. It's unsafe, so we don't know if it's existing, and we can just access it with the name of it. So now we can add the dependencies. Here, one thing to note is that we don't have access to the extension like implementation and compile only. So we need to declare explicitly the type of dependency we are adding. So here, the tools annotation is going to be an implementation, and Java inject is going to be a compile only. One thing to keep in mind is that you really should limit the number of dependencies you are declaring in a convention plugin, because we don't want to declare dependencies that you are not going to use in every module. So in our case, like this is a non-read lib, so we know that we are going to want to inject stuff. So Java inject allows us to access the inject annotation, and tool annotation is the shared annotation of our project, and Kotlin is just it's Kotlin. One thing to note also is like you can reuse a convention plugin in another one. So for example, our future plugin is also a lib plugin, so I can just apply it and it's going to be a lib plugin too. Now, one thing to note also is that when I'm writing the app convention plugin, I'm not going to configure the version name, the version code, and the application ID, because those should be configured by the consuming modules. Now, so at my previous company, I wrote them, and to do that in a simple way, instead of writing code, I wrote some Gradle scripts. But the issue with that is that the configuration time was really huge. So we had like 100 modules, and it was taking 1 minute to build. Last year, I saw the same mistake was made in 900, and here's the numbers. So configuration was taking like 12 seconds to 12 seconds, sorry, and the build time was 25 seconds, while with just cut plugin, it's taking less than a second and 11 seconds to build. So it's a small project, it has a small impact, but for bigger projects, it's really important. A few disclaimers also, like you don't have to follow this to the letter. To the letter, sorry. You need to speak with your team. How many modules do you have? Is build configuration even a pain point yet? And are you going to be able to maintain those plugins? Are you going to be able to teach how to maintain them? And also, there might be something that could be done better. Now, finally, I will show you some references and people you can follow if you like build configuration. Again, so you don't have to follow them blindly. Some of them are from people who are working in a huge company with multiple people working on a single app, and there are some people who are dedicating only to build configuration, so it's not the same scale. So first of all, I think you might have heard of this article from Tony Robalik. It's Herding Elephants, so he's working at Square, on build and tooling. Then one thing that's really cool is Slack. They open source a build configuration, so you can go there. This year, there was a talk from Zach Square from Slack on some best practices to improve the build time. And finally, the 900 project we showcase the last guideline of architecture by Google. So I'm done. It was really less than 20 minutes. There's a more complete code references and complete notes. There's a small Word project on it. You can go there. And if you have feedback, you can scan this, and there's a form, and you can send me feedback. Do you have questions?
If you ask her to talk in English, we can translate in French, no worries.
So if I ask a question, I hope I get a surprise in back. Anyways, my question was about what are the drawbacks, if any, of doing this? Like, looks like you can share a lot of things. Looks like it can help you reduce your build time. So looks like the perfect solution on paper. What are the main drawbacks?
I would say the drawbacks is like you need to know how Gradle is working. Like writing script is kind of easy, but code you need to understand how it's written. Then it's code, so you need to maintain it, you need to test it, you need to be sure that it's working and it's not breaking when there's a new AGP version available, or when Kotlin, the Kotlin Gradle changes, so you depend on that. So yeah, it's just maintaining code, like it's just that more code to maintain, and yeah, I would say it's major drawback.
So I switch sides and bravo. And I forgot to mention that Satyan is coming from Lyon today to be with us, so another round of applause, please.